Hey guys, so for our first YA book for our new book club, we are here with Meg Wolitzer and Belzhar. Thank you very much for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So this is your first YA, but your last book, The Interestings, was about teenagers.
Yeah.
So what did you feel as an author going in when you were thinking about tone and your audience? What was different about this, about writing a YA?
Well, I think when you write for adults about adolescence, sometimes you're really taking the long view. You're looking at teenage experience as it sort of transforms over time. I really kind of took the short view for Belzhar. In The Interestings, it follows characters from age 15 until their 50s. And here, it just takes place over the course of one semester at a boarding school as these changes happen in a bunch of students. And I really took the short view. I didn't think about how life was going to unfold.
Did you read a lot of YA to kind of prepare a lot of maybe more recent modern YA? Or?
Yeah, I really was enjoying reading YA. My son had read some YA and loved it, and that sort of got me into writing this, actually. In addition to the fact that I'd always written in addition to the fact that I'd always written about adolescence. But yeah, there was a lot of really good YA around to read over the years. I had read Looking for Alaska, which was terrific, and my son loved it. Anything good that you read really is inspiring.
So what would you say to adults who say that adults shouldn't read YA?
Well, that shouldn't is the killer in the sentence right there. I mean, because I think any of us who are passionate readers and passionate writers, we bristle at the idea of what we should or shouldn't do. You should read what excites you. You should read what you're passionate about. So I just sort of think that obviously you go for where your interest is.
Okay. So you've written before about how sometimes female authors are not as lauded as male authors, that sometimes they're put in a separate place called women's fiction and it can be looked down upon. And there was kind of an issue with all the attention that John Green's novel, The Fault in Our Stars, got. A lot of YA authors, female authors, bristled and said, we've been producing this great YA content for years and we've never gotten the same attention as male authors. So what did you think about that?
I wasn't really, I kind of, that's around the time that I was sort of coming to YA, and I had been so focused on what was going on in adult literary fiction that I really can speak more to that issue. I think that women, whether they're writing for a YA audience or an adult audience, have sometimes been put on what the New York Times called the second shelf. When I wrote that piece, it was a little play on the second sex. Obviously, things need to get better for women. VIDA, this organization that has this great website, vidaweb.org, that's V-I-D-A, web.org, does something called The Count. Are you familiar with that? And how they basically do a count of how many women and how many men are represented in the most literary publications. And it's kind of shocking what a disparity there is. So to hear that women have complained in the YA world is not shocking either. But on the other hand, I have to say, John Green is a wonderful writer, and I think that he is somebody who deserves a lot of attention. So it's not about there being like this one pie and everybody has to jump on it. I think that the world, look, sexism exists, and women are, it's amazing that even in this day and age, we're still fighting for things that those of us whose mothers were really affected by the women's movement, like when I was growing up, we're still talking about some of those same issues. It's kind of amazing.
It's surprising. So this novel, it talks a lot about grief. And it has a kind of fantasy element. Where did you find the inspiration for the story?
When I read the Belzhar, which the title Belzhar is a play on, although you don't need to have read the Belzhar or even have heard of it to read my book, what I was responding to in myself was having read the Sylvia Plath novel when I was an adolescent, and it just kind of opened so much up for me. I remember being on a train and reading it. A friend who was very bookish gave it to me, and it was so sad, and it was about Plath being trapped in this feeling state that she couldn't get out of, and her breakdown in college. And I think for a certain kind of bookish girl, the moment when you realize how painful things can be is this kind of awakening, and I connect it with reading that book. But it's really not just about that, it's the moment of realization of what things are going to be like. And I think my character Jam, who is not like Sylvia Plath, and it's not a retelling of the Belzhar as some people have, initially thought it was. She feels things very, very deeply, but it's a book about perception and reality.
So what I found interesting about this book, and the same thing kind of happens in another boarding school YA Winger by Andrew Smith, is that they are not allowed to have cell phones or internet connection, so they're very isolated from the outside world. And what I found interesting about this book and that I didn't really miss the technology, that it seemed like a very clear kind of way to eliminate that. So, and also the characters in this book are very isolated. So did you choose to take out technology because you kind of wanted to examine these relationships and modern teenagers without it, or just kind of an extension of their isolation?
Good question. I mean, I think that all of us who are writing for a YA audience have to deal one way or another with issues of technology. You know, I deal with this in my adult novels as well, though. I mean, less to the feverish extent that I might deal with it with teenagers, but I think that, you know, we go to books often to escape the tyranny of technology, the need for technology, the seduction of technology, and I wanted to see my characters in a state that shows them as much them as is possible. So when they're not being distracted away, whether it's by whatever it's by that's not really relevant to my themes. Another way that you could do it, I suppose, is by showing characters through their technology use, and I know that people use it a lot. I joke with friends that I don't want to write in that sans serif font that texting requires in a book. Anytime I see that, I'm like, oh no. Well, I didn't go out of my way just to create a boarding school just to keep them away from technology, although it could seem that way. But it was pretty freeing to not have to think about that in this book because it wasn't really relevant. They do feel isolated. I mean, that's actually part of it. So they feel cut off from everything, but through that isolation, they reach a deeper place.
Is there a part of this book that you're the most proud that as an author you're just like, oh, this character works so well, or this scene, or just any particular aspect?
There's a relationship between Jam and her roommate who's gay, DJ, and I like the idea of them lying in bed and talking about who they are. And DJ kind of opens up to Jam, but Jam, you know, and sort of talks about being attracted, being in love with her teacher really when she was young and not really understanding that maybe was an extension of what she might feel for girls or, you know, when she got a little older. But Jam sort of paradoxically can't talk about what happened to her because it's something she's not allowed to talk about in her class. It's kind of complicated and something that she can't really speak about openly. And there was just sort of a tenderness between the roommates that I liked writing about. Like whenever they were together alone, I remember being at camp, because the interesting starts at summer camp. So much gets said at night in boarding school, I guess. I never went to boarding school, or, I mean, I wanted to more than anything. This is a school for emotionally fragile, highly intelligent teenagers. I would have killed to go to that school. But what gets said when you're away from adults and it's somebody you can feel vulnerable around. So I like writing that.
Are you working on any projects right now that you can mention or talk about?
I have a novel that I'm working on now that deals with issues of women in power. And I'm signed up to do more of all kinds of things, but I don't like to speak too much about it, really, because I don't want it to go away.
And if you had to give one or two YA book recommendations to our audience?
Let's see. The Unfinished Life of Addison Stone by Adele Griffin. Do you know that book? Mm-hmm. That's very cool. That would be a start. I'm a big fan of Eleanor and Park, like everybody else, so you don't need my recommendation. But I'm always looking for great YA books, and also for books for adults that have strong adolescent characters in them. I think that reading about adolescence and writing about adolescence, for me, it's not about nostalgia only, although that's a small part of it. I mean, it's really about the moment in life when you experience firsts. And I think that that's pivotal in any kind of book.
Definitely. Well, thank you very much for coming, and this is definitely a book to check out.